UN Chief Guterres condemns Gaza escalation, warns of devastating civilian impact. Israel launches airstrikes on Yemen's capital Sana'a. And French Foreign Minister says France, Britain and Germany urged the UN to restart Iran's sanctions over nuclear program. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres condemned the recent escalation in Gaza, warning of devastating consequences for civilians as Israeli advances military operations in Gaza City. He highlighted the dire humanitarian crisis, describing Gaza as piled with rubble, piled with bodies, and stressed the urgent need for accountability amid serious potential violations of international law. He also emphasized Israel's obligation as the occupying power to ensure food, water, medicine, and humanitarian aid reach the population. Reiterating his appeal, Guterres demanded an immediate and permanent ceasefire, unfettered humanitarian access across Gaza, insisting that no more excuses, no more obstacles, no more lies should stand in the way of protecting civilians.
Military takeover Gaza City signals a new.
Egyptian Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli and Qatari Prime Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani reaffirmed their strong commitment to achieving an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Coordinating closely with the United States, both leaders emphasized the urgent need to stop hostilities and enable the swift delivery of humanitarian aid to the people of Gaza. During their meeting in New Alamein, they also condemned any attempts to forcibly displace Palestinians from their land, underscoring their full rejection of such actions. Egyptian Foreign Minister Badr Abdulati has reaffirmed Cairo's relentless efforts to secure a ceasefire in Gaza despite ongoing Israeli intransigence. Speaking at a joint press conference with Qatari Foreign Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani in Al Alamein, Abdulati stressed the coordinated work between Egypt and Qatar and the United States to halt what he described as genocide and systematic starvation in the Gaza Strip. He condemned the use of starvation as a weapon in collective punishment against the Palestinian population and firmly rejected any attempts to displace Palestinians from their land. Egypt has dispatched its 25th humanitarian convoy to Gaza as part of the Zaid al-Izza from Egypt to Gaza campaign organized by the Egyptian Red Crescent. The convoy includes tons of medical equipment, children's supplies, medicines, dry food, canned goods, water and clothing. Since its launch on July the 27th, the campaign has delivered thousands of tons of aid, including food, staples, baby milk, medical supplies and fuel. The Egyptian Red Crescent continues coordinating aid entry through the Rafah border crossing, supported by over 35,000 volunteers, delivering more than 500,000 tons of humanitarian relief since the crisis began. UN human rights experts have raised serious concerns over reports of enforced disappearances of Palestinians seeking food at aid distribution centers run by the Gaza Humanitarian Fund GHF. In a joint statement, 7 independent experts highlighted incidents in Rafah where individuals, including a child, were forcibly disappeared after visiting these sites. The experts accused Israel's military of direct involvement in these disappearances, urging an immediate end to what they described as a heinous crime. The call comes amid growing fears for the safety of starvation Palestinians relying on humanitarian aid in Gaza. All UN Security Council members except the United States have declared the famine in Gaza a man-made crisis and warned that using starvation as a weapon of war violates international law. In a joint statement, the 14 members called for an immediate unconditional ceasefire, the release of all detainees held by Hamas and others, a major increase in aid, and for Israel to lift all restrictions on aid delivery. The U.S. questioned the famine report's credibility, while Israel dismissed the findings as deeply out.
Levels of acute malnutrition among children in Gaza. We note that at least 41,000 children are at height.
The director of Shifa Hospital in Gaza City, Mohammed Abu Salmaya, has warned that Gaza's healthcare system is on the verge of collapse amid escalating conflict and severe shortages. Abu Salmaya said hospitals are overwhelmed and unable to treat the thousands of wounded and sick. He added that between 1,500 and 2,000 injured people currently have no access to hospital care, while disease is spreading rapidly in overcrowded camps and homes. Abu Salmaya called on the international community to protect medical workers and urgently open humanitarian corridors to deliver aid and evacuate patients. The UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, has revealed that one of its staff members in Gaza have been displaced 19 times during the ongoing conflict. In a post on social media platform X, UNRWA said the repeated displacement reflects the scale of suffering endured by civilians under continuous bombardment and evacuation orders. Ongoing bombardments and displacement orders are forcing entire families to abandon their homes once again amid fear and destruction, the agency stated, adding that people in Gaza are hungry and exhausted, and UNRWA renewed its call for an immediate ceasefire. World Food Programme WFP Chief Cindy McCain has warned that the slight uptick in aid reaching Gaza is not nearly enough to prevent widespread malnutrition and starvation. McCain said around 108 trucks are now entering Gaza daily, still far short of the 600 trucks that were crossing during the ceasefire period. After visiting Deir al-Balah and Khan Yunis this week, including a clinic, treatment malnourished children and mothers, McCain described the situation as one of utter devastation. Gaza's government media office has rejected Israeli claims that southern areas of the enclave offer vast empty spaces for displaced Palestinians, calling it a false narrative. aimed at justifying further forced displacement. In a statement, the office said more than 125 million displaced people are already cramped into southern and central Gaza, living in makeshift tents and lack basic necessities. It added that the continued displacement under bombardment was a war crime and a crime against humanity under international law, and accused the Israeli army of spreading falsehoods to worsen the already dire humanitarian crisis. 19 children from Gaza in need of urgent medical treatment arrived in Jordan on Wednesday, accompanied by 62 family members. This marks the 10th group of young patients transferred for care since the war began. Some will be treated in Jordan, while others will be sent to third countries for specialized treatment. Once recovered, they and their families will return to Gaza to make space for more patients. Jordan's King Abdullah II pledged in February to treat up to 2,000 children from Gaza. So far, 518 have arrived in 10 batches, but officials say efforts are slowly by logistical hurdles, Israeli restrictions, and ongoing military operations make safe transfers very difficult. Israeli tanks and soldiers were seen amassing near the Gaza border as smoke billowed from Gaza City following fresh air and ground strikes. The operations come ahead of a planned offensive on Gaza City, described by Israeli leaders as Hamas's final stronghold. The move has sparked international alarm, especially as famine grips the city and domestic criticism over the humanitarian toll. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz reiterated the offensive will continue unless Hamas surrenders and releases all detainees. Dozens of Israeli settlers stormed the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound in occupied East Jerusalem. Local sources reported that the settlers entered the site in groups under the protection of Israeli police. The settlers were seen conducting provocative tours of the country yards and performing rituals, escalating tensions at the sensitive religious site. The incident is the latest in a series of settler incursions into the Al-Aqsa compound, which Palestinians view as part of an ongoing attempt to alter the status quo of the holy site. Dozens of Israelis protested outside Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's residence in Jerusalem, urging him to reach a deal with Hamas to end the war in Gaza and secure the release of the remaining detainees. Meanwhile, in Washington, U.S. President Donald Trump shared a policy meeting on Gaza's future. Former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair and ex-Middle East envoy joined Trump to discuss the ongoing hostage crisis, humanitarian aid, and post-war reconstruction plans. A senior White House official described the meeting as a routine policy session. Trump, now in his second term, has vowed a swift end to the war, but a resolution remains elusive after 7 months. Israel has launched airstrikes on Yemen's capital Sana'a. The airstrikes following the Israeli military's announcement that it intercepted 2 drones fired from Yemen. The first drone entered Israeli airspace around noon, triggering air raid sirens before being intercepted near Gaza communities. A second drone, launched less than 2 hours later, was stopped before crossing into Israel. No casualties or damages have been reported from the drone incidents. French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot announced that France, Britain and Germany have formally notified the United Nations Security Council to restart sanctions against Iran over its nuclear program. The E3 trio triggered the snapback mechanism and prevent further Iranian nuclear escalation ahead of a mid-October deadline to restore sanctions lifted under the 2015 deal. Barrot expressed on X that this move does not mark the end of diplomacy. The decision follows unsuccessful talks in Geneva, where Iran failed to provide tangible commitments to halt its nuclear activities. And now we move on to press conference by the White House Press Secretary Carolina Leavitt.
Thanks to the largest middle tax cuts ever signed into law by President Trump, with no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security, Americans in all 50 states will keep more of their hard-earned money. The average American taxpayer will see a tax cut of nearly $4,000 because of these pro-growth provisions, according to analysis from the Nonpartisan Tax Foundation. In other news, President Trump continues to deliver on his promise to restore law and order to our nation's capital. Since President Trump's intervention, there have been more than 1,283 arrests right here in the District of Columbia. Total crime in D.C. is down 19%, and violent crime is down 30%. Carjackings in the district are down 67%. Homicides are down 57%. Robberies are down 40%. Motor vehicle thefts are down 32%. And assaults with dangerous weapons are down 23%, and property crime is down 18%. These numbers prove the president's bold actions to make D.C. safe and beautiful again are working, just like he said they would. And that's why on Monday, the president took additional action to sign an executive order taking steps to ensure that cashless bail in Washington, D.C. is eliminated. For too long, D.C.'s reckless cashless bail policies have allowed dangerous criminals to be quickly released, which endangers everyone who lives in and visits our wonderful capital. No cash bail has also foolishly forced law enforcement to repeatedly arrest the same offenders over and over again, only for them to be released back into our nation's capital. This is the definition of insanity, and the president is seeking to end it. He also signed a separate executive order addressing the crime emergency in D.C. by instructing the National Park Service to hire additional United States Park Police officers to support public safety, and directing the U.S. Attorney's Office for D.C. to hire additional prosecutors to focus solely on violent and property crimes. So while liberal Democrats across the country continue to double down on their failed soft-on-crime approach, the American people, including local D.C. leadership, business owners, and residents, are rallying behind President Trump's crime crackdown. According to new polling, 81% of Americans say crime is a major problem in large cities across the country. And a clear majority of Americans believe the president's actions are justified and necessary to reduce crime in these cities. Indu Bhatia, who runs a liquor store a half mile from the White House here just down the street, is one of those Americans who are grateful for President Trump's public safety push. Indu recently told the New York Post that her store was robbed so many times that they had to spend exorbitant sums of money on security, jeopardizing her family's financial future. But thanks to President Trump's strong action, Indu said, quote, "All of my employees, including me, we feel much safer, and even our customers feel really happy when they walk into our store." And just yesterday, Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser credited President Trump for surging federal law enforcement personnel and said neighborhoods, quote, "feel and are much safer." We thank Mayor Bowser for her cooperation and her willingness to help us make D.C. safe and beautiful. This entire effort has vindicated what President Trump and law and order advocates have been saying for years, and this is our message to Americans in Democrat-run cities nationwide. Decline is a choice. You don't have to live in constant fear of being robbed, raped, or murdered. Your leaders are lying to you, and they have been failing you for decades. The President Trump approach of upholding law and order by letting our brave men and women in blue actually do their jobs to aggressively fight crime works. In just a few weeks, President Trump has done more for DC residents than Democrats did in 50 years. And this can be replicated in other crime-ridden cities across the nation. As President Trump has said, all of these elected officials in charge have to do is pick up the phone and ask for the president and the federal government's help. President Trump doesn't care if they are a Republican or a Democrat leader. He wants Americans to be safe and for every law-abiding American citizen across the country to be able to thrive in their city and in their community. With that, I'll take questions. Here in our new media seat today, we have social media influencer, content creator, Brandon Tatum. Brandon, thank you so much for joining us today. Why don't you kick us off?
Well, Caroline, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And on behalf of everybody that follow me, the millions of people that follow me, I want to say thank you for making the sacrifice and dealing with some of the most disingenuous people on planet Earth at times. I have two questions. The first question is associated with the shooting that occurred the other day. And I want to ask the question of, we know that it's not a gun thing. Any rational person knows it's not a gun thing. We know it's a mental health issue. So I want to know from you, what is President Trump and the White House going to do to address mental health issues around the country associated with these shootings? And the second thing.
We were at press conference with the White House spokesperson in Washington, and now we move on with our news bulletin, where two diplomats revealed that European countries will begin the process of reimposing UN sanctions on Iran. Citing European diplomats, Reuters reported that Britain, France and Germany will initiate the process of reinstating international sanctions on Iran at the UN Security Council on Thursday. The European Turkey had met with Iran in an attempt to revive diplomatic efforts regarding the nuclear program before losing their ability in mid-October to reimpose sanctions on Tehran, which were lifted under the 2015 nuclear deal signed with global powers. Iran has launched a rapid cleanup at a nuclear-related site north of Tehran, destroying buildings and likely erasing evidence tied to past weapons development, according to an independent research group. This move comes amid resumed but stalled talks under the IAEA oversight, with Tehran still resisting full inspections even as Europe prepares to reimpose UN sanctions.
متاسفانه من پیکر شهدا رو دیدم کودک و
UNICEF has said around 260,000 civilians, including 130,000 children, remain trapped in El Fasher, North Darfur, cut off from aid for over 16 months. Fighting and blockades have displaced 600,000 people in recent months. Last week, a UN food convoy was attacked north of El Fasher amid ongoing conflict between Sudan's army and the rival Rapid Support Forces. Both sides blame each other for the targeting aid. Britain's Foreign Secretary David Lammy has announced that the United Kingdom has summoned the Russian ambassador following a deadly overnight barrage on Ukraine by Russian forces. Putin's strikes last night killed civilians, destroyed homes and damaged buildings. Lammy said on X the killing and destruction must stop. Russia claimed the strikes targeted military infrastructure, but officials in Kyiv reported damage across 7 districts with numerous civilian casualties. Moscow continues to deny deliberately targeting civilians despite mounting evidence and ongoing international condemnation. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has condemned Russia's overnight missile and drone strike on Kyiv, calling it a brutal response to global calls for ceasefire and diplomacy. Russia chooses ballistic instead of the negotiating table, Zelensky said on social media, accusing Russia of ignoring diplomatic opportunities and continuing to kill civilians. He called on countries like China and Hungary to respond and urged new tough sanctions on Russia. Russia must feel accountable for every strike, for every day of this war, he added. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has expressed outrage following Russia's deadliest drone and missile attack on Kyiv since July, which killed 10 people and injured 38. Von der Leyen said 2 missiles struck just 50 meters from the EU delegation within 20 seconds, describing the incident as a stark reminder of the Kremlin's continued campaign of terror. She expressed relief that no staff were harmed, but emphasized the strike was clearly an attack on the European Union itself. In response, von der Leyen announced that the EU is finalizing its 19th package of sanctions targeting Russia and is moving forward with plans to use frozen Russian assets to aid Ukraine's defense and reconstruction.
Since July, and as you can see, we will come forward soon with our 19th package of hard-biting sanctions.
The Kremlin has said it remains interested in peace talks despite a deadly Russian missile strike on Kyiv that killed at least 15 people, including children. Spokesman Dmitry Peskov said both sides continue attacks on military and civilian targets, but stressed Russia's goal of a political solution. He added no ceasefire agreements have been reached yet and called for discreet negotiations. The strike on Kyiv, civilian areas and EU mission has drawn widespread condemnation, raising questions about Moscow's commitment to peace. The Kremlin has rejected a New York Times report claiming Russia or its proxies flew surveillance drones over routes transporting U.S. military supplies through Germany. Spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said the Kremlin hadn't fully reviewed the article but called the story another newspaper fake, arguing that if true, German authorities would have noticed and spoken out. China will hold the gala on September the 3rd at the Great Hall of the People to mark the 80th anniversary of victory over Japanese aggression. The event, themed Remember History, Honor the Martyrs, Cherish Peace, and Create the Future, will feature performances by a generation of young artists showcasing drama and epic storytelling to honor the Communist Party's role in the war and China's commitment to world peace. Attendees will include party and state leaders, war veterans, honorees, and representatives from across society. The gala follows a massive military parade planned for the same day to commemorate this historic milestone.
珍爱和平、开创未来为主题，突出表现了中国共产党在全民族抗战中的。
Farmers are facing an unprecedented crisis as England's driest spring in over 100 years leaves 200 cattle with little to graze. The United Kingdom's Met Office warns that summer 2025 could be the warmest on record, forced to feed herd silage, hay and cereals twice daily since giving up grazing 2 months ago. Farmers' costs have surged about 1,000 weekly sterlings, with beef production worth 104 billion sterlings annually. Rising feed costs push up food prices, which have climbed 4.9% in the past year. That brings us to the end of our news bulletin. Here's what we have been covering. UN Chief Guterres condemns Gaza escalation, warns of devastating civilian impact. Israel launches airstrikes on Yemen's capital Sana'a. French Foreign Minister says France, Britain and Germany urge UN to restore Iran's sanctions over nuclear program. This concludes our news bulletin for this hour. Don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram and TikTok at QNewsEG to stay informed. Thank you very much for watching and stay tuned, dear viewers. And until we meet again tomorrow at 4 p.m. call local time, this ends our transmission for today.